Many people may have preconceived notions about what it's like to work for the federal government. Some of them might even be positive, such as you have a lot of job security and therefore you don't really have to worry about as much as you would in the private sector. Others might even be negative, such as everyone's lazy and therefore no work really ever gets done. But I myself, having worked for the federal government now for a little over a year and a half, have had some noteworthy observations and experiences that I'm going to go through in this video that have given me some insight into what it's actually like behind the scenes. Now, granted, a lot of this depends very heavily on many different things, including the agency you work for, the position you hold, and really the type of person you are. So for me, for example, I think that working physically in Washington, D.C. is an awesome thing, while some people might disagree. But with those things in consideration, here's what my personal experience has been like so far. So the first thing I'll talk about is the people that I work with. And there are those that I get along with, which is great. But just to name a few of the other more noteworthy personality types that I've come across, yes, there are those that are either lazy or incompetent. And unfortunately, they continue to get away with it because of the way the system works. I know people that get paid more than me and literally do nothing, and there's not really been any repercussions for that. On the other hand, I've also met people who have been in the federal government literally their entire career. I can't really relate to that because I've been in the military, I've been in the private sector, I've even been in the academic sphere. So I bring a pretty large variety of perspectives to my position. But for those that have been in the government for their entire career, while they do have some very valuable insights they can offer me, at the same time, they see things very differently. So for example, some people have grown accustomed to actually saying no to their supervisors when asked to do something they don't want to do because they've never been in the private sector or the military where that's not an option. Or they complain about menial, trivial things because they don't understand that life could be so much worse. But the way I see it, people are people no matter where you go. No job is perfect. But if it does get really bad, the great thing about government agencies is they have multiple divisions within them. So you can always transfer to a different one with a little bit of work and still stay within the same agency. So it's a price that I'm more than willing to pay. Now the next thing I'll talk about is the work that I do. And of course this depends heavily on your job. But for me personally, although I wear a few different hats, my work can mostly be characterized as software engineering. Now, when I was in the private sector, I felt like I was working alongside people whose skill levels were just off the charts. In comparison to me, especially, I've always felt like my skill level has just kind of been middle of the road. Not bad, not great. So it was very stressful and very intimidating in those environments when the standards were much higher. But coming into the government, where the standards are a little more relaxed, my skill level is now seen as off the charts as well. So I have a lot of room to innovate, I have a lot of room to make executive decisions, and I'm absolutely in love with the work that I do. I've also never been asked to work unreasonable hours. It's usually just an average of 8 hours a day. I've even gone so far as to voluntarily work more than 8 hours a day on occasion because I've never felt suffocated or like everything's being dictated to me. Another thing to discuss is the atmosphere. So if you work for the private sector, then you're probably going to find yourself in an upscale, fancy office building in the heart of a major city. But if you work for the government, then you're probably going to find yourself in a not so fancy workspace in the heart of Washington, D.C. And this is another thing that you could go either way on because different people have different likes and dislikes. But for me personally, I enjoy it a lot. Now, my agency's building isn't that great because you can tell it's been around for a while. It's a little worn out and run down. It's also not that bad because we do have a lot of amenities like a parking garage, we have restaurants in the building, and I even have my own office, which is remarkable because I'm not even in a supervisory position. But what I love the most is feeling like I'm part of this subculture of people, if you will, that is the federal government worker of Washington, D.C. Because it's not only a fun experience, it's a one-of-a-kind experience. There's only one Washington, D.C. There's only one seat of the federal government of the entire country, the United States. And so I love the feeling that I get when I go into the building and I see that it's a little run down and worn out, because I know that it stands for something and it's been around for so long. It's like it's part of a tradition. I even love the commute coming into work because the metro system in DC is great and it's very easily used and accessible. And even though the commute is 45 minutes to an hour, I love just looking out the window and seeing, landmarks like Arlington, Virginia, or seeing the Washington Monument as I get off the metro and walk into the office. So it's just such a great experience and I love everything that it has to offer. And last but not least, the stress level, which I've found to be remarkably low. Because for one, I enjoy the work that I do. So whenever I'm given a challenge, it's not that I see it as something to stress over, but instead I see it as an exciting problem to solve. But more importantly, because of the job security. So I know that no matter what happens, whether I get into an argument with somebody, or we have a change in leadership, or we have a tight deadline, at the end of the day, I will always have a job. Whereas when I was in the private sector, I had to constantly be on edge and worry about whether I was going to have a job the next day. But in my current situation, not only in my professional life, but also in my personal life, I can actually enjoy myself a little and indulge, knowing that there's not a secret price tag attached to everything that I do. And that in turn enables me to be happy, which is arguably the most important thing in life. So if you have questions that you'd like me to address in my next video, please feel free to put them in the comments below, and I'd love to address them if I can. And with that, thanks for watching. I hope that helps. I'll see you next time.